Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world filled with noise, constant chatter, endless distractions, and the unrelenting need for validation. Yet beyond this noise lies a place few dare to enter: silence. It is in this silence that the human spirit is stripped bare, where pretenses fall away, and where true strength begins its quiet formation. What appears empty and uncomfortable at first is, in truth, the furnace of transformation. Tonight I invite you to journey into this silence, not as absence but as presence, not as weakness but as power, for strength is not born in the applause of the crowd, but in the stillness where the soul confronts itself. To walk alone is one of the greatest tests a human being can endure. It is not merely the absence of company, but the presence of something far deeper, the confrontation with existence itself. When one chooses, or is forced, to walk alone, the silence can feel unbearable at first. The noise of the world fades, the approval of others disappears, and the illusions that once gave comfort dissolve. Yet, within this silence lies the hidden voice of the universe. The solitary traveler begins to realize that being alone is not a severance from life, but a deeper connection with it. The crowd distracts with noise and movement, but the universe speaks only in stillness, and only the one who dares to walk alone can hear it. Walking alone is an act of courage. It means choosing authenticity over acceptance, choosing truth over conformity. To break away from the collective is to reject its borrowed beliefs, its fears, and its desires. Most cling to the safety of the group because the group gives the illusion of certainty. But certainty is not truth. It is a shelter built upon shifting sand. The one who walks alone learns to stand without that shelter. They feel the winds of uncertainty, the storms of doubt, the coldness of judgment, and yet they keep walking. In this endurance, something extraordinary awakens. The individual begins to sense that though they have left the crowd, they are not abandoned. The very universe itself becomes their companion. The path of solitude opens the inner world in a way nothing else can. In the absence of noise, the unconscious begins to speak. Hidden fears surface, forgotten memories rise, and shadows once ignored come forward. To many, this is terrifying, which is why they avoid solitude at all costs. But those who walk alone understand that these shadows are not enemies, they are guides. They reveal the parts of the self that must be faced and integrated. In walking alone, one does not merely travel through the world. They descend into the depths of their own psyche. The silence outside becomes the mirror that reflects the truths within. The paradox of solitude is that in walking away from others, one discovers a greater connection with all of existence. The trees begin to speak with their silence, the stars reveal their eternal order, and the rhythm of the universe becomes tangible. The individual realizes that separation from the crowd does not mean separation from life. In fact, it is only then that the fullness of life can be experienced. Every sound, every moment, every breath becomes infused with meaning because there is no longer distraction to blur the experience. The solitary traveler begins to understand that they are walking not just on earth, but with the cosmos itself. Solitude has always been the crucible of transformation. The great visionaries, prophets, creators, and seekers of truth all stepped away from the collective before they returned with wisdom. Their solitude was not an escape. It was an encounter with something greater than themselves. When one walks alone, they discover the vastness of their own soul and the vastness of the universe intertwined. They no longer see themselves as an isolated fragment, but as a participant in something eternal. In solitude, the illusion of separateness begins to dissolve. The boundaries of the self blur, and the individual senses that they are being carried by forces far beyond human comprehension. To walk alone is to discover that the universe is never truly silent. It whispers through intuition, through synchronicities, through the quiet pull of unseen patterns. The one who walks alone becomes sensitive to these subtle forces because there is no longer a crowd to drown them out. Each step feels guided, each encounter significant, each obstacle meaningful. Solitude reveals that nothing in life is random. Everything becomes part of a larger dialogue between the individual and the universe. The deeper one walks into solitude, the stronger the connection becomes. The world no longer feels hostile or indifferent. Instead, it reveals itself as a living presence, responding to the courage of the one who dares to walk alone. The journey that begins with fear transforms into communion. The traveler realizes that they were never walking in emptiness. They were always walking with the universe. There is a strength that cannot be borrowed from others, a strength that does not depend on praise, acceptance, or recognition. It is the strength of identity forged in solitude. When one stands apart from the crowd, stripped of external affirmation, they are confronted with the raw essence of who they truly are. This confrontation is not easy, for it reveals the fragile places where the self has been shaped by imitation, by expectation, by fear of rejection. To step into solitude is to face the uncomfortable realization that much of what we call identity is not our own. It has been constructed by society, by family, by culture, and by the endless desire to belong. But solitude shatters these borrowed masks. Alone, the false identities dissolve, leaving the individual with the task of discovering what remains when nothing external defines them. In solitude, the noise of the world fades, the voices of others, telling us who to be, what to desire, how to live, become distant echoes. At first, this silence feels unsettling. Without constant affirmation, the ego trembles. Without comparison, the sense of worth becomes uncertain. Yet it is precisely in this trembling, in this uncertainty, that identity begins to solidify. The solitary individual learns that their existence does not require validation. They learn to stand without applause, to continue without approval, to walk without company. Each moment endured in solitude strengthens the core of being, like steel forged in fire. The one who embraces solitude discovers that true identity is not created in relation to others, but in relation to the self. Alone, one begins to hear the quiet stirrings of inner truth, thoughts untainted by opinion, desires untouched by expectation, dreams unshaped by comparison. These inner stirrings are often subtle, easily drowned in the noise of society, but in solitude they rise to the surface. The individual begins to sense what they truly value, what they truly seek, what they truly are. This discovery is not immediate, nor is it always comfortable. It requires patience, self-honesty, and the willingness to face both light and shadow within. But as these inner truths are uncovered, they form the foundation of an identity that cannot be shaken by the outside world. The strength of solitude lies in its trials. It brings loneliness, doubt, and the temptation to return to the safety of conformity. Yet those who remain discover that these trials are not punishments, but necessary tests. Just as a tree grows deep roots when it stands exposed to the storm, the individual grows inner stability when they face the winds of isolation. No opinion, no rejection, no external judgment can uproot a self that has been anchored in solitude. Such a person does not seek themselves in the mirror of others. They carry their reflection within. The power of an unshakable identity is not arrogance or defiance. It is freedom. The solitary individual does not need to please the crowd, for their worth is not measured by the crowd's approval. They are not easily swayed by trends, nor are they broken by criticism. Their choices emerge from inner alignment, not external pressure. This independence allows them to walk paths others fear to tread, to hold beliefs others reject, to pursue visions others cannot see. Their solitude becomes the womb of originality, the birthplace of authenticity. As solitude deepens, the individual realizes that identity is not a mask to be worn, but a living essence to be embodied. This essence does not shift with circumstance or collapse under scrutiny. It remains steady even when misunderstood, even when opposed, even when unseen. To possess such an identity is to become immovable in a world of shifting sands. It is to carry within oneself a compass that does not falter, no matter how the winds of life may blow. The greatest gift of solitude is this inner anchoring. It transforms a fragile, borrowed sense of self into something indestructible. The one who has endured the silence, who has faced their shadows, who has discovered their own voice, walks through life unshaken. Their presence carries weight, not because they demand recognition, but because they no longer require it. They are whole within themselves, and this wholeness radiates as strength, clarity, and authenticity, qualities that no external force can erode. When a person steps into isolation, the world changes shape. The familiar patterns of noise, distraction, and constant interaction begin to fade, leaving behind a clearer, sharper landscape. What once seemed distant or hidden becomes visible, and what once appeared essential is revealed as trivial. Isolation sharpens vision because it removes the filters of society, dissolving the fog of conformity that blinds so many. Alone, the individual learns to see not just with their eyes, but with the depth of their inner perception. The human mind, when constantly surrounded by others, tends to absorb the desires, judgments, and illusions of the collective. It becomes cluttered with borrowed voices. But in isolation, those voices grow faint. The silence is uncomfortable at first, almost unbearable, because it leaves space for truths that were previously drowned out. Yet within that silence, perception transforms. The eyes begin to notice what was once ignored, the subtle details in nature, the hidden patterns of thought, the quiet impulses of the soul. Isolation becomes the lens that focuses awareness, cutting through the blur of distraction. To be alone is to enter into a deeper form of seeing. It is not limited to the physical world, though that too becomes more vivid. The rustling of leaves, the shifting of clouds, the movements of light and shadow suddenly carry meaning. More importantly, the inner world reveals itself with intensity. Thoughts once dismissed begin to unfold with clarity. Fears once avoided reveal their roots. Dreams that seemed impossible take shape with new sharpness. The solitude strips away the layers of confusion, forcing one to look directly at what has always been present but hidden. This sharpening of vision often feels like both a gift and a burden. To see more clearly is to realize how much of life is built on illusion. The masks people wear, the games they play, the superficial pursuits they chase all become glaringly obvious. In isolation, the individual cannot pretend not to notice. The truth presses itself forward, often harsh, sometimes liberating. The sharpened vision is not only outward but inward, showing the cracks in one's own character, the lies told to oneself, the compromises made to belong. Isolation leaves no room for self-deception. What is seen cannot be unseen, and this honesty becomes the foundation of deeper wisdom. The great seekers of truth have always understood the value of isolation. The prophet on the mountain, the philosopher in retreat, the artist withdrawing from society, all stepped into solitude not to escape the world, but to see it more clearly. For clarity requires distance. When one is too entangled in the crowd, vision becomes blurred by proximity. Only by stepping back can the whole picture come into view. Isolation grants this distance, offering perspective that cannot be gained while immersed in the noise of others. This sharpening of vision extends beyond thought into intuition. Alone, the individual becomes attuned to subtle currents of meaning, synchronicities, symbols, and insights that would go unnoticed in the chaos of daily life stand out with luminous clarity. The unconscious begins to reveal itself, speaking in dreams, impulses, and sudden revelations. In isolation, the veil between the seen and unseen thins. The mind, unburdened by external chatter, begins to perceive the invisible connections that weave life together. Such vision carries with it a power that few understand. The one who sees clearly cannot be easily deceived, cannot be swayed by the illusions that bind others. They recognize falsehood when it appears, whether in the words of others or in the whisper of their own fears. Their sharpened perception allows them to navigate life with precision, avoiding the traps that ensnare those who remain blind. This is why isolation has always been feared and revered. It strips away illusion, leaving truth bare and undeniable. The longer one endures isolation, the sharper the vision becomes. What was once blurry resolves into detail, what was once hidden emerges into light. The solitary individual begins to sense patterns in chaos, meaning in randomness, and purpose in hardship. Their sight is no longer bound to surface appearances but penetrates to essence. And while such clarity may isolate them even further from the crowd, it also grants them a freedom few possess. They are no longer fooled by the masks of the world, nor by the masks they once wore themselves. Isolation, though harsh, gifts them the piercing eyes of the soul. Strength does not appear in moments of applause, nor is it born in the midst of noise and recognition. True strength is cultivated in the quiet hours, in the unseen battles fought when no one is watching. Silence, though often feared, is the crucible where the self is tested and remade. To sit alone with one's own thoughts, stripped of distraction, is to encounter the raw forces that shape character. It is here in the stillness that endurance is forged, discipline is tempered, and resilience is born. Silence is not merely the absence of sound, but the stripping away of external comforts. Without the constant hum of conversation, the background of music, or the chatter of others, a person is left with nothing but themselves. At first, this can feel unbearable. The mind races, searching for something to cling to, anything to fill the emptiness. Yet, it is precisely this emptiness that carries transformative power. To endure silence is to confront the restless nature of the human mind, and to overcome this restlessness is to gain mastery over it. The storms within become most visible in silence. Doubt surfaces, fear whispers, insecurities rise with sharpness. Many cannot endure this confrontation and escape back into noise, back into distraction. But the one who remains learns to wrestle with these inner forces. They learn to listen without judgment, to witness their own weakness without collapsing under it. With time, the silence begins to shape them, not by removing struggle, but by teaching them how to stand in the midst of it without flinching. Strength emerges not from the absence of fear, but from the ability to face fear in silence and remain unbroken. Silence is also the realm of discipline. In a world where constant stimulation tempts the senses, silence becomes a training ground for self-control. It forces the individual to detach from external cravings and to rely on inner resources. The one who practices silence learns to withhold impulsive reactions, to observe before acting, to respond with clarity rather than compulsion. This ability to restrain and direct one's energy becomes a form of inner armor, protecting the individual from being enslaved by desires or manipulated by external forces. Silence sharpens willpower the way fire tempers steel. The strength forged in silence is not loud or boastful. It does not announce itself, nor does it seek recognition. It is a quiet, steady force that reveals itself in moments of trial. When chaos erupts, the one who has trained in silence does not panic. When insult strikes, they do not crumble. When solitude surrounds them, they do not feel abandoned. This kind of strength is unshakable because it is rooted not in circumstance, but in the depths of the self. Silence also opens the door to clarity. In the absence of noise, thought becomes sharper, vision steadier, and intuition more pronounced. Decisions made in silence are not rushed or clouded by external influence. They emerge from a place of inner alignment. Such clarity becomes a source of strength because it prevents one from being swayed by confusion or deceived by illusion. The silent individual sees more deeply, and in seeing clearly, they act with conviction. Throughout history, those who sought wisdom understood the necessity of silence. Warriors prepared in silence before battle. Philosophers withdrew in silence before revealing truth. Visionaries retreated into silence before returning with light. Their strength was not accidental. It was cultivated deliberately in those quiet hours where the soul meets itself. Silence was their teacher, their furnace, their proving ground. In silence, the individual also learns patience. Strength is not forged instantly, but through repetition, endurance, and the willingness to remain still even when nothing seems to change. Patience is the hidden muscle of strength, and silence is where it is exercised. Waiting, listening, enduring without distraction, these small acts build a power that others, consumed by noise, never attain. The one who embraces silence does not become fragile or dependent. They learn to stand without validation, to endure without comfort, to act without applause. Each moment in silence is a weight lifted in the invisible gym of the spirit. Slowly, the soul grows stronger, steadier, unyielding. What once felt unbearable becomes a source of energy. Silence, once feared, becomes a companion, and within that companionship, strength takes its final form. Strength is not a performance, nor is it granted by the opinions of others. It is shaped in the hidden hours, when no one is watching, when silence presses heavily, and the self must stand alone. Those who can endure the quiet are not broken by it, they are remade by it. The fire of silence tempers them into something unshakable, something authentic, something eternal. Remember this: the world may admire the noise of power, but it is in silence that true power is born.